If you ever played GURPS, you know that sometimes it can be difficult to overcome high active defenses, and you have to employ such maneuvers as feint or attack options such as deceptive attack. There are other options, but one I'd like to spotlight today is setup attack. It was introduced in Pyramid 352 in the Delayed Gratification article by Douglas Cole. Setup attack is a new maneuver, or wait, is it an attack option? It seems that there is an editing mistake here, but judging from what's actually written in the article, it's an attack option after all. In its basic form, it's a deceptive attack whose effect is delayed until the next attack, but it's actually much more involved than that, especially if you use some of the optional rules. You roll your attack at -2 for every -1 you'd like to inflict on your target's next defense if you succeed. Just like a deceptive attack, a setup attack cannot bring your effective skill below 10 and is incompatible with telegraphic attack. The defense penalty is applied only to the next attack made by you, but this attack must be made in the same turn or the following turn. Here is one other important difference between setup attack and deceptive attack. The defender's margin of success on his defense roll against your setup attack is subtracted from the defense penalty imposed by this setup attack. A critical success eliminates the entire setup penalty. Since this is an attack option, you can make an all-out determined setup attack, or you can use all-out attack double to perform a setup attack and a follow-up attack that takes advantage of the setup attack. You can even combine it with rapid strike in the same way. I think it should be even possible to perform a deceptive setup attack. You also have to remember that a dual weapon attack is considered a single attack. Just like deceptive attack, setup attack is an actual attack that deals damage normally. Unlike feint, however, setup attack is obvious, so the defender knows that he will defend at a penalty. So that's the gist of it. And this option seems to be perfectly usable as is, but the article also provides some optional rules. You have to choose which ones do apply in your game and which ones do not. And it seems that some rules are incompatible with one another. Let's check them out. I will probably have a visual diagram on the screen to make it easier to digest if I manage to come up with one. The first optional rule that is recommended by the article is that the full defense penalty is only applied to the defense that was used against the setup attack, and all other defenses only take half of that penalty rounded down. I like this one. Another option is to make it more swingy. Instead of every -2 to hit imposing a -1 penalty on defense rolls, every -1 to hit gives -1 to defend. But this penalty is decreased by double the margin of success on the defense roll. Not a fan of this one. I think this makes it too luck-based. Then you have an option to let consecutive setup attacks stack. So you make a setup attack on turn 1, for example to impose a penalty of -2, then another setup attack on turn 2 for another -1, and on turn 3 you do a normal attack against which the enemy defends at -3. One thing that isn't clear here, if the penalty from the first setup attack applies against the defense against the second setup attack. I think it should not, but I wish the article spelled it out clearly. Also, repeated setups get obvious. The GM may say that second and following setups are defended against at +2, or have a doubling penalty from +1 against the second setup, +2 against the third setup, +4 against the fourth setup, and so on. Another rule is that if the defender doesn't actually defend, then the setup attack becomes a normal attack, no penalty to hit and no penalty to defend. If you do not like the variable penalty or want to speed things up, you can turn setup attack from an attack option to a technique. Another optional rule makes setup attacks more teamwork oriented. The target of your setup attack defends against attacks made by other characters within reach at a halved penalty. Nothing is said about rounding, but I assume that the penalty is rounded down. This halved penalty lasts until you use your setup attack's benefit. Optionally, this shared penalty might only apply to whatever active defense was used against your original setup attack. Additionally, if you and your friends have the teamwork perk, Then you can make a setup attack that does not benefit you, but benefits all your teammates with this perk fully. It might sound complicated, but it's actually quite simple. I have to say that these two particular paragraphs really could have used another pass by an editor. It seems that this shared penalty used to work differently, instead providing an attack bonus instead of a defense penalty. And the wording can easily confuse the reader, especially the example. Check this out. Do you see what I mean? It talks about attack bonuses for the attackers when setup attack actually decreases defense for the target. I wouldn't have been able to figure it out if not for a more proper explanation in the final optional rule. Speaking of that, the final optional rule makes setup attacks even more distinct from deceptive attacks and feints. When making a setup attack, you have to designate the hit location and attack it at full penalty, like normal. The defender defends at a normal penalty imposed by this setup attack only against attacks aimed at other hit locations or against the same hit location made with a different weapon. A hit location for this purpose includes all of its sub-locations, so face, nose and ear are considered the same location, and so do torso and vitals. Finally, you have to decide if setup attacks replace or coexist with feints, as they serve a similar purpose. You know, now that I think about it, the article doesn't say that it is only applicable to melee attacks. Really makes you think. As you can see, there are more optional rules in the article than base rules. I like that. As a GM, you can make setup attacks work the way you want them to work. As a player, however, you'll probably have to learn the new setup attack rules in every game. You and the GM all probably have the same idea for how deceptive attacks work, but setup attack rules might be different. As a GM, you probably have to copy-paste and combine all the necessary rules together. Personally, I have never used setup attacks yet, but I want to introduce them in my next game. I think I will make them coexist with feints, introduce halving the penalty to active defenses that weren't used against the setup attack, stacking setup attacks, a cumulative doubling bonus to defend against consecutive setups, the no defense equals no setup thing, the location and teamwork rules. All these rules might seem complex, but I feel that they are pretty intuitive and easy to grasp, so don't be afraid to try them out. Overall, Pyramid 352 is an excellent issue that has other articles that are very useful if you are trying low-tech games, and I highly recommend you buy it. If you'd like similar setup rules for grappling systems, you should consider getting the Pyramid issue 334 for A New Take on Grappling article. These rules are very interesting. And that's it. Have you ever used setup attacks in your game? How did they work out? Feel free to tell me in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching, have a good day, and I'll see you next time.